Movie reviews are a naturally creepy hobby, don't you think? How many people have reviewed this film before you? How many of them were sick? How many of them lost their minds? We came here to get the review, and we don't rattle, do we? 1408 is a 2007 American psychological horror film based on Stephen King's 1999 short story of the same name, directed by Mikkel Hafstrom, starring John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson.
Gerald Olin, manager of the Dolphin.
If I can just get the key to 1408.
In the 95 years of the hotel's existence, there have been 56 deaths in 1408.
56.
No one's ever lasted more than an hour. The first victims to Kevin O'Malley.
Cut his own throat.
Do not stay in that room.
This is it.
Welcome back to the Cult of Films. I'm John the host, and as you could see, I'm on location. That's right, I decided to try my hand at the paranormal investigation, and I'm going to try to last more than an hour in the newly renovated Room 1408. So this is a Stephen King novel adaptation from the short story collection Everything's Eventual. And although the filmmaker and the writer took creative liberties, changed and tweaked things here and there, this is one of Stephen King's favorite film adaptations of one of his works. Initially, this film was actually a box office sweetheart, earning $133 million against its $25 million budget. But after the initial pop, this film has faded a bit into the cinematic rear-view mirror, only being brought up by cult genre fans and King's Quartet. But maybe you and I could both do some investigative work and figure out why 1408 has faded in our memories. First off, I think people have compared this to one of King's other famous works in The Shining. And I'm not just talking novel to novel, because I don't think anyone really compares one of King's short stories to The Shining. I think more so the comparisons were made between Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and 1408, which is completely unfair because although really minimal similarities, it is a completely different animal, tone, and setting, and this is a lot smaller film. Smaller in every sense in the word, in scope, in location, and most importantly in raw material. More than half of the King short is the conversation between Enslin and Olin, leading up to the events of what happens in the room. The Shining had 688 pages of world building, and it already had that connective tissue to his other works. So when you're putting something like this just because they're haunted place movies and they're from the same author, you put this movie up against not just a genre-defining film, but a cinema-defining film in The Shining, of course you're going to get let down a little bit. What's really fun about this is it allows die-hard King fans like myself to kind of speculate, is there connective tissue to other works in 1408, especially pertaining to the overarching magnum opus that is the Dark Tower series that kind of connects most of Stephen King's work, which nothing in here has been confirmed to be part of that universe, but there are things that you can speculate on, like, is this room located on a thinny, and that's why only this particular place kind of batshit crazy? Or does it have a similar creature like the door demon from Dutch Hell Mansion, like from the Wasteland? Is that the same type of entity that's guarding this room? But just pertaining to this film, I think it's a well-executed, intimate character study of a person that's dealing with loss and trying to figure out what to do next after your life plan A goes to shit. The story of 1408 centers around author Mike Enslin, who has shifted his writing style from more personal character pieces that were not financially successful, but far more critically acclaimed. He's become a cheap bargain rack faux commentator about his experiences staying in haunted places like hotels and graveyards. He is deeply cynical due to his losing his child at a very young age to disease and abandoning his wife after his daughter's death. He receives a postcard from an unknown source telling him not to stay in room 1408 in the New York hotel The Dolphin. Tries to book the room without any success because of the refusal of the hotel to release the room to the public. His publisher, played by Tony Shalhoub, finds a legal loophole in which he confronts the hotel manager, Gerald Olin, played by Samuel L. Jackson, warning him and trying to entice him with access to intimate knowledge of the murders, suicides, and natural deaths recorded from the prior guests staying in this room. Enslin, never experiencing any paranormal activity in the most haunted locations and secretly being desperate to experience something that would prove his daughter's faith in the afterlife, he rejects all of Olin's attempts at dissuading him from staying in the, quote, evil fucking room.
It's an evil fucking room.
That's the setup, and after that is his experiences and the psychological trauma that he has to face and kind of get on top of his grief from his past. And that's kind of the rest of the movie. So let's talk about the casting. John Cusack is perfect in this role.
Painfully dull painting is the ever-popular The Hunt. Horses, hounds, and constipated British lords. Some smartass spoke about the banality of evil. If that's true, then we're in the seventh circle of hell. It does have its charms.
Who else would you have helming a project where you just have to make the audience interested in a film that takes place in one location with little to no other supporting characters to play off of? He proved he could do this in High Fidelity, and his character, Mike Enslin, isn't really that different from Rob Gordon. Charismatic, sympathetic, and aloof. Samuel L. Jackson is playing Samuel L. Jackson, as he tends to do, but it is a nice change up, and it's a nice break in the dryness of tone, where this is even one of his more scaled back and less like in your face, I'm Samuel L. Jackson type roles, but just his presence and his charisma, and for the very small amount of screen time that the two play off each other, they have great chemistry. Such good chemistry, I might add, that they tried to recreate that in another one of Stephen King's novel film adaptations a couple years down the road in Cell. Don't watch it. It didn't work. Moving on. And this movie is kind of funny too, and it's not funny like there's jokes happening, but it's just John Cusack's charisma and his commentary, as well as a few small instances with Samuel L. Jackson. There is a little bit of levity to this. It's not just dread and anxiety the whole time. Otherwise, I don't think they could maintain that. There is some nice breaks of tone. The real supporting character of the film is the room itself. It's not flashy, it's not overdone with CGI, it's not even traditionally scary or gory. What it does is play on Ensign's personal fears and heartache, and in turn kind of gets under our skin, forcing us to relate to Cusack's very grounded and cynical character. There's no dumb movie logic here, so that's why it's so relatable and what makes John Cusack such a good POV character to bring us along for the ride. The film utilizes the against the ticking clock trope very effectively, because, well, it does it very literally as well, just to add that extra layer of tension. There is some horrific images in here. It's all done so sparingly and believably. Like, there's certain times that he's not just fighting against a ghost, you know, per se, where he's fighting against the elements. It's hot in his room. He's uncomfortable. It gets very cold in his room. There's no, like, super imminent danger. There's all types of brain fuckery instead. The film has multiple endings. It has a happier theatrical ending, which is a little bit closer to the source material, but not completely faithful to King's short story. And it has a more bleak director's cut ending, which I think is the far superior version, although there are some issues with that, which I'll get into in a little bit. Because it's not a perfect film. I do have issues with the numerous plot holes, especially with the minibar scene, which is kind of funny because I think the minibar scene is probably the most unintentionally funny, or at least entertaining scenes, because he goes full crazy Nick Cage in this scene. He does a couple times in this film, but especially in this scene.
Huh? What do you want from me?
You! I want my break!
There's a point where he's speaking directly through this like minibar gateway to Olin, where it seems like everything from when the door shuts to like the end of the movie, Olin seems to be this antagonistic, like ringmaster type character, but it kind of feels like it completely conflicts with Jackson's character from the beginning scene and the ending scene, especially in the director's cut version. You know, at the beginning, he's begging him not to go in there. He's begging him not to do it because he knows kind of what's going to happen. And then he's kind of like overjoyed and elated to what happens at the end of the film, kind of defeating the room, so to speak. But while Enslin's trapped in the room, Olin's giving off this vibe that he's enjoying his suffering. Even when John Cusack's character is on the phone talking to like the evil front desk receptionist, she mentions Olin by name. And I get it. I understand that this is how Enslin perceives Olin's character, because he's trying to make sense of what's happening to him the entire time. He's a cynic. He's trying to rationalize everything. At one point, you know, Samuel L. Jackson's character gives him a bottle of liquor, so he's like, oh, he doped me. You know, that's why I'm hallucinating.
Wait a minute. He gave me booze. He gave me booze. Did he take a sip? I can't remember. He dosed me. It was the booze or the chocolates. Never take candy from strangers.
It's just the execution of, is Olin really in on it, or is he really a good guy? Which I think could have been handled a little cleaner. There's some really effective jump scares in here that feel very earned, especially when Enslin's trapped in the room. But there's one at the end of the director's cut that feels super cheap, and it's no better than like Bagul jumping out and saying boo to the audience. The rest of the movie is so much smarter and just feels like it cheapens the scene, and unfortunately cheapens the entire arc because it comes almost at the very end of the film. So now I'm going to say spoiler warning, because I do want to talk about details that happen at the very end of the film, especially in the director's cut version. So if you haven't seen 1408 yet, go ahead and watch it if you're interested, and then come back and watch the rest of the review. I love the sequence of Mike Enslin setting the room on fire, sitting there and taunting the room. Like, the room's trying to stop it from happening, like it's turning on its own sprinklers, and all the while John Cusack is just kind of laughing at it and taunting it. It's a great sequence. The very, very end, after his funeral, it shows him in the room after it's all like burned and charred as a spirit, still basically trapped there. So it has this element, at least to me, of, well, what was the point of the sacrifice anyway? I guess he's kind of reunited with his deceased daughter, because you hear her calling out to him while he's like a ghost, and then he's like, okay, and he starts like walking in her direction. But as you could see during the rest of the time where it shows his daughter as an apparition, it's not really her. I feel like that's the room fucking with him, because it gets really dark. She dies again in his arms and then bursts into like ashes and like burned pieces. It's a very like effective and horrific scene. But if that's the spirit, like, why would you want to be trapped in there with that anyways? It's not real. So I don't know, that's my biggest issue with the director's cut ending. But really, with nitpicks aside, I think that this film from 2007 still very much holds up. It has a timeless quality to it. There's no bad effects that will date the film, and it's that one man play-like performance that John Cusack is just so good at, especially like early 2000s. He was just firing on all cylinders. This was what he did the best. And like I said, perfectly cast for this type of thing, where you just get to be along for the ride with one person sitting in an empty hotel room, and he's tasked with having the audience not be bored for a single minute, and I was not. There's so much fun camera movement. There's a little bit of effects, mostly practical, and you know, on face value, this should be a very boring film. It's not a traditional scary, like, boo film, although I said there are some scares in it. What it is, it's almost a drama. It's almost, I would say, a psychological thriller drama, because it's very sad. Once you tear down the walls of 1408, what you're left with is very solemn, Kafka-esque story about love and loss and trying to stay on top of those emotions without letting them consume you. As far as who I would recommend this film for, of course, hardcore Stephen King fans and completionists. Just, again, I can't reiterate enough. Don't try not to compare it to The Shining. It's just a completely different story and has a very different tone. But other genre fans would probably like this as well. Not if you just want to see like a Conjuring or something like that. It's not obviously scary or spooky. It's more of a psychological thriller. Where does 1408 rank for you as far as Stephen King adaptations go? For me personally, I tend to like the short story adaptations like this and The Mist from Frank Darabont. I guess they lend more to the filmmaker interpretations because there's not so much to go off of. You could kind of make your own film that way. I mean, that's what Stanley Kubrick did with The Shining, and we saw that Stephen King did not appreciate that at all. But what's your favorite Stephen King film adaptation from one of his books? Or what's your least favorite? Dark Tower. I'm not trying to tell you what to say or what to think, but it's The Dark Tower. You could listen to this in podcast form on iTunes and Spotify. Leave us old-timey keys or bottles of liquor, something to help me really experience what 1408's all about, since I'm here anyways. Actually, leave me a wake-up call in about an hour. You can follow this very show at The Cult of Films on Twitter, or you could follow me at John the Host. And until next time, knock first before entering.